Friends, 2021 has begun, and we are in a very dark place. It is looking pretty dicey for humanity and a million other species. 5 years since the Paris Agreement, and the world is speeding in the opposite direction, as Greta Thunberg said. The pledges made by the political leaders of the global north, the worst polluters of the planet, show that the driver is still asleep at the wheel of the neoliberal bus that is powered by consumerism. The pandemic and the global response to it have blocked any talk of the environment, even when it is clear that the disaster resulted from inroads into nature. Governments and corporations have put profits over lives. They have even loosened environmental regulations. And under the cover of COVID, surveillance is on the rise. Still, for Greta Thunberg, there is hope. We are the hope. We, the people. The hope lies in democracy. It is the people who have the power. If enough people stand up together and repeat the same message, then there are no limits to what we can achieve. This is kidocratic education, aimed at adults and the 1%, by minors and minorities. The fight for democracy and the fight for our planetary survival are the same thing. I began to theorize kidocracy in 2012, when the Idle No More movement began. Stephen Harper had passed Bill C-45, basically opening up indigenous lands for mining and development. 4 indigenous women opposed it and started a continent-wide movement. Invited by Wanda Nanebush, an Anishinaabe curator and artist, I attended rallies, round dances, and protests that celebrated Native life and rejected the colonial program of work, development, and jobs. The imperative to decolonize overlapped completely with that of environmental action. Learning about the notorious Canadian residential school system opened my eyes to how the colonial governments had imposed the timetable of work on the play of Native life. I began to see Idle No More as an urgently needed de-residential schooling of Canada, a conscious unlearning of the colonial program of endless progress and development. And when I saw a sign at the BLM movement that said unlearn, that reminded me of decolonize and triggered an understanding that what was needed was a deprogramming rather than an ongoing accretion of knowledge, a removal rather than an accretion of an oppressive legacy of 2,000 years of Christianity, colonialism, and capitalism, to shrug all that off and to start exuberantly afresh. The pandemic has forced a lot of us into isolation, like the character Dave Bowman in 2001: Space Odyssey. We are confronting the urgent necessity of totally reinventing humanity. We need to transform ourselves into agile, optimistic, experimental thinkers and actors if we are to be dealing with current and foreseeable emergencies. Instead of the roles assigned to us by neoliberal governments and corporations, as passive consumers, we need to transform ourselves into agents of action. So I'm here to pitch a new philosophy that calls for the rewilding of humanity as well as of nature. I see Kidocracy as a dynamic, transformative space, animated by diverse registers of experience, anchored in 9 values. And here is the first of them: everyone is an artist. This is an aphorism by Joseph Beuys, the performance artist, philosopher, and co-founder of the Green Party, who was a cultural force in the 60s and 70s. When I heard it first, I thought, how is that possible? But now I see that it is exactly that kind of inspiration we need to pull ourselves through this graveyard shift of our COVID winter to become agents of our destiny, to revolutionize our relationship to nature and to ourselves as a species, particularly Beuys' concept of social sculpture, in which society is a great work of art to which each of us contributes as an artist. This concept of social sculpture is extremely relevant to us now. According to Beuys, only on condition of a radical widening of definitions will it be possible for art and activities related to art to provide evidence that art is now the only revolutionary power. Only art is capable of dismantling the repressive effects of a senile social system that continues to totter along the death line, to dismantle in order to build a social organism as a work of art. Every human being is an artist who, from his state of freedom, the position of freedom that he experiences at first hand, learns to determine the other positions of the total artwork of the future social order. For example, he considered his teaching his greatest work of art. Social sculpture is best exemplified by his work 7,000 Oaks, which began at the Castle Documenta 7 in 1982 and resulted over the next 5 years in 7,000 oaks being planted in Castle. Beuys bemoaned the emphasis on the rational at the expense of the emotional. He presented himself as an artistic shaman while also being a scientific scholar. As a teacher, he hosted daily discussions about art, democracy, the university, and all of these in society. For Beuys, the 3 elements of freedom, democracy, and socialism had to coexist for each of them to be meaningful. His performance art frequently included animals, dead or alive, and went beyond human semantics. Speaking of his performance piece, How to Explain Pictures to a Dead Hare, he said, "Even a dead animal preserves more powers of intuition than some human beings with their stubborn rationality." In I Like America and America Likes Me, he flew into New York and spent 3 days in a gallery room with a living coyote and left the US without communicating with anyone else other than the coyote. Another work involved him being blanketed in felt with two dead hares at the opposite ends. He spent 9 hours making animal sounds. He later said, "The sounds I make are taken consciously from animals. I see it as a way of coming into contact with other forms of existence beyond the human one. It's a way of going beyond our restricted understanding to expand the scale of producers of energy among cooperators in other species, all of whom have different abilities. This notion of social sculpture could unite all of us and integrate us with the animal world in order to transform ourselves and the planet, to pass through the eye of the needle, so to speak, and begin a new epoch." Let us all become artists. In my next video, I will be talking about the second principle of kidocratic education, polymorphous perversity. Till then,